Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The global economy is holding its breath, watching closely as uncertainty ripples through financial markets and boardrooms around the world. All eyes are on the U.S. Supreme Court as it prepares to rule on President Trump's sweeping 2025 tariff policy, a decision that could reshape the rules of international commerce. This case isn't just about import duties or trade disputes. It's a fundamental test of presidential power, the separation of powers, and the future direction of American trade policy. At stake is a critical question. Can a president, by declaring a national emergency, unilaterally impose tariffs, essentially a nationwide tax, without the approval of Congress? The answer could alter the balance of power for generations. The court's decision will set a precedent for executive authority at a time when global supply chains are already stretched thin and international trade is more interconnected than ever before. Trump's administration argues the tariffs are essential for national security, claiming they protect American industries and jobs from foreign threats. But critics warn it's a dangerous overreach that bypasses Congress and undermines democratic checks and balances. International markets are volatile, businesses are anxious, and consumers are already feeling the pinch as prices rise and uncertainty grows about the future of the economy. The Supreme Court's decision will send shockwaves through the economy, affecting everything from Wall Street to Main Street and influencing how America does business with the world. It will also redefine the balance of power in Washington, setting new boundaries for the executive branch and Congress alike. For businesses, consumers, and America's allies, this is more than a legal battle. It's a pivotal turning point for democracy, the global economy, and the future of international trade relations. The crisis is the result of Trump's revived America First agenda, launched with a series of executive orders in early 2025. By invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, Trump declared a national emergency and imposed sweeping tariffs. The first wave targeted Canada, China, and Mexico, citing their failure to stop fentanyl trafficking. The second, broader Liberation Day tariffs hit over 70 trading partners, with rates up to 50%, upending global commerce overnight. Critics argue IEPA was never meant for trade disputes and that Trump's actions bypassed Congress's constitutional authority over tariffs. Businesses scrambled to adapt, trading partners threatened retaliation, and a coalition of states and industries sued, claiming executive overreach. The legal battle escalated quickly, landing at the Supreme Court as the nation and the world demanded clarity. The outcome will determine whether future presidents can use emergency powers to reshape the global economy. At the heart of this conflict lies the Constitution's unmistakable grant of tariff authority to Congress, not the president. For over 2 centuries, Congress has held the exclusive power to impose and regulate tariffs, shaping the nation's economic relationships with the world. This separation of powers is a foundational principle, designed to prevent any single branch from wielding unchecked control over trade policy. Trump's use of IEPA as a legal workaround is unprecedented in American history. The law, originally passed in 1977, allows the president to regulate international transactions during times of national emergency, but it never explicitly mentions tariffs or gives the president the power to impose them. Instead, IEPA was intended as a tool for freezing assets or blocking trade with hostile nations, not for reshaping the entire tariff landscape. The central legal question is both simple and profound. Does the phrase "regulate importation" in IEPA mean the president can unilaterally impose tariffs without congressional approval? Or does it merely allow the president to restrict certain goods in emergencies, stopping short of rewriting tariff law? A coalition of states and businesses quickly challenged the tariffs in court, arguing that such sweeping economic changes require clear authorization from Congress. The Federal Circuit Court agreed, citing the major questions doctrine, a legal principle that says big policy shifts need explicit congressional approval, not just vague statutory language. The court ruled that IEPA does not authorize a unilateral presidential tariff regime. However, it allowed the tariffs to remain in place while the case moved through the appeals process, recognizing the significant economic impact at stake. Trump blasted the decision, calling it catastrophic for presidential authority and national security. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case on an expedited basis, signaling the urgency and importance of the issue. The stakes could not be higher. If the president prevails, executive power over trade and emergencies will expand dramatically, setting a powerful precedent for future administrations. If not, Congress's constitutional authority over tariffs and trade policy will be reaffirmed, preserving the balance of power envisioned by the founders. The legal showdown is set, with the nation's economic future and the boundaries of presidential power hanging in the balance. The outcome will affect not just trade, but the very structure of American government. The Supreme Court's ruling will clarify the limits of emergency powers for generations to come, shaping how future presidents and Congresses respond to crises and define the scope of executive authority. As the Supreme Court prepares to hear arguments in this landmark case, both sides have meticulously sharpened their legal strategies, knowing the stakes could reshape the balance of power in Washington. The Trump administration contends that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, grants the president sweeping authority to regulate imports, including the power to impose tariffs, whenever a national emergency is declared. Their lawyers argue that, especially on matters of national security and foreign affairs, courts should defer to the executive branch's judgment, since the president is uniquely positioned to respond swiftly to threats. They emphasize that Congress retains the ultimate check, able to rein in presidential power if it chooses. Opponents, however, push back forcefully. They insist that tariffs are, at their core, a form of taxation. And the Constitution is clear that only Congress has the authority to tax Americans or alter the nation's economic policy in such a fundamental way. Critics warn that allowing the president to impose tariffs by emergency decree would not only undermine the separation of powers, but also set a precedent that could be abused by future administrations, eroding vital constitutional safeguards. The challengers invoke the major questions doctrine, arguing that only Congress, not the executive, can authorize such sweeping and consequential changes to the nation's economic landscape. At its heart, this case is about far more than trade policy. It's about the fundamental question of who holds the power to tax, regulate commerce, and ultimately shape the direction of the American economy. The justices now face a profound decision. Is this a political question best left to Congress, or does it cross a constitutional line that the judiciary must defend? However the court rules, the outcome will define the boundaries of executive authority and congressional oversight for generations, shaping the future of American governance. The tariffs have hit American businesses and consumers hard, acting as a massive tax on imports. Companies face skyrocketing costs, forcing them to raise prices, cut jobs, or overhaul supply chains, options many can't afford. Major employers like Purdue Farms have announced layoffs, while brands like Smucker's have hiked prices on everyday goods. The uncertainty has paralyzed investment and hiring, especially for small and medium-sized businesses. State governments are also feeling the pain, with higher costs for public projects and essential services. A dozen states have joined the legal fight, arguing that tariffs are draining their budgets and hurting taxpayers. The policy meant to protect American industry is, for many, a threat to survival. The economic fallout is widespread, touching every corner of the country. The Supreme Court's decision will determine whether relief is on the horizon or if the pain continues. Beyond the headlines, the tariffs are squeezing American families, especially those with lower incomes. Everyday essentials, clothing, electronics, food, are more expensive, forcing tough choices at the checkout. Small businesses like Terry Cycling face existential threats from soaring costs, risking closure and job losses. Even large companies that support schools like Learning Resources are passing on millions in extra costs to parents and educators. The result? Higher prices, layoffs, and shrinking household budgets. The promise of protecting American jobs rings hollow for those losing work or struggling to afford basics. The tariffs have created a cycle of economic pain, with real consequences for families nationwide. The Supreme Court's ruling will decide if this burden continues, or if relief is in sight. This case is more than an economic dispute, it's a test of America's constitutional order. If the court sides with Trump, it could grant presidents sweeping new powers to tax without Congress, upending the separation of powers. Legal experts warn this would be a historic shift, blurring the lines between executive and legislative authority. Even some conservatives are uneasy, fearing unchecked presidential power could be abused by future administrations. The case has deepened political divisions, with Trump's approval rating slipping and Republicans split over executive overreach. For Democrats, it's a rallying cry against what they see as constitutional violations. The Supreme Court's decision will reshape not just trade policy, but the very structure of American government. The The stakes, the integrity of the nation's checks and balances. Experts across law, economics, and politics are sounding alarms about the administration's legal theory and the tariffs' economic impact. Many see the case as a defining moment for presidential power and congressional authority. Legal scholars argue the major questions doctrine is a crucial safeguard against executive overreach. Economists warn the tariffs are fueling inflation, hurting workers, and inviting global retaliation. Critics say allowing a president to impose taxes by emergency decree would undermine Congress's power of the purse. The fear future presidents could use emergencies to bypass lawmakers on everything from climate to immigration. The consensus, the Supreme Court's ruling, will set a precedent that shapes American governance for decades. The nation waits, knowing the outcome could redefine the limits of presidential power. As the Supreme Court prepares to rule, the nation stands at a pivotal moment. The justices must choose between reaffirming Congress's authority over trade and taxation, or granting the president sweeping new powers. Upholding the tariffs would revolutionize executive authority, letting future presidents bypass Congress in the name of emergency. Striking them down would restore the balance of power and offer relief to struggling businesses and families. The case has exposed deep political and constitutional rifts, forcing a national reckoning over the role of government. Whatever the outcome, the decision will echo for generations, shaping the future of American democracy and the global economy. The story doesn't end here, it's the start of a new chapter in the struggle over power and principle. The nation waits, knowing the path chosen will define its destiny.